trucking, coming chips machine, keep trucking, like the two-note man, together, more or less.
The Grateful Dead lived for the moment. They always made things up as they went along. They never played a song the same way twice. Never even had a set list. They had good nights and bad nights. But no matter what happened, the Dead's music carried a sense of wide-open possibilities. From the acid tests in San Francisco in 1965 to sold-out stadiums in the 90s, the Grateful Dead are legends. This is their story.
Come here, Uncle John's band, by the riverside.
The Grateful Dead were an all-American band with deep roots. They played country and blues, gospel and rockabilly, old folk songs and new ones with a traditional twang.
Don't ease me. Don't ease me.
They were also psychedelic explorers who might just play 20 minutes of feedback in the middle of a set. Moving from city to city with their devoted fans, the Deadheads close behind. The Dead lived at the center of a tie-dyed traveling circus that kept getting bigger and bigger. They didn't like show business, so they kept the music in the spotlight. And while record companies didn't quite know what to make of them, the fans never went away. The Dead lived for the moment, and they did an amazing thing. They made their moment last for 30 years. In the early 1960s, San Francisco was where the Beat generation passed the torch to the hippies. Poets held forth at coffee houses in North Beach, and beatniks would hang around the City Lights bookstore. There were folk singers and jazz cats. There were earnest college students and tough bikers. There was also a cultural catalyst, an experimental drug called LSD. The Grateful Dead absorbed a little of everything. At the center of the band was Jerome John Garcia, who could play the guitar just like a ring in a bell. Jerry's mother, Ruth, was a nurse. His father, Jose Garcia, was a musician from Spain. Jose played clarinet and saxophone in swing bands before he settled down to run a bar. Jerry was born in 1942 and named after Jerome Kern, the Broadway giant who wrote Old Man River and Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. Jerry's childhood was marked by misfortune. When he was 4 years old, he lost half a finger on his right hand, chopped off by his older brother while they were splitting wood. When Jerry was 5 years old, he saw his father drown in a fishing accident. For the next 5 years, his grandparents raised him while his mother worked.
I got my first guitar when I was 15, on my 15th birthday. I played around with it for a year before I learned how to tune it properly.
It was 1957 and rock and roll was brand new. That same year, Jerry also discovered marijuana. On weekends, he was going to classes at the California School of Fine Arts in North Beach learning to paint. Then he practiced his guitar, country, jazz, blues, and folk songs. Jerry dropped out of high school and tried the Army, but after going AWOL 8 times in 9 months, he was discharged. It was the early 1960s, the day of the Hootenanny, and Jerry started playing around the folk scene near Stanford University. For a while, he had a duo with a poet named Robert Hunter, who would become the main lyricist for the Grateful Dead. Garcia was at a music store buying a banjo when he got to talking to a drummer named Bill Kreutzmann. They hit it off, and Jerry got a job at the store, selling instruments and teaching guitar. One of his students was a 16-year-old named Bob Weir. By early 1965, Jerry, Bob, and Bill were working together in a folk group called Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions. For blues songs, the singer was Ron McKernan, better known as Pigpen.
He was this 15-year-old kid who hung out in Palo Alto, cutting school all the time and drinking wine, and played harmonica. And his father was the first rhythm and blues disc jockey in the Bay Area. There's an interesting thing about Pigpen. So he grew up with the blues and R&B.
Pigpen looked like a biker. He wanted Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions to plug in, and soon he convinced Jerry, Bob, and Bill. The jug band turned into the Warlocks. They needed a bass player, and they chose a music major named Phil Lesh, a friend of Garcia's who loved modern jazz and electronic music. After 2 weeks of practice on the electric bass, he was in the Warlocks. And there they were, a mismatched gang brought together by music. Phil Lesh, the intellectual, Billy Kreutzmann, the hard-swinging drummer, Jerry Garcia, the folky, Bob Weir, the eager kid, and Pigpen, the blues-loving biker. Pigpen was a drinker. The others were more interested in mind-expanding drugs. In December 1965, the Warlocks got a gig as the house band at Ken Kesey's Acid Test. Kesey, who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, started the Merry Pranksters, a group of psychedelic practical jokers. The pranksters put together public parties called acid tests, where they served Kool-Aid mixed with LSD, which at the time was still legal. There were strobe lights and beatniks spouting poetry on the sound system. People danced and painted their faces and watched the walls melt. As the band played at the acid tests, their basic blues and country songs turned freeform. Beginning with the first acid test, the band used a new name. One night they were thumbing through a dictionary and Garcia was struck by the phrase Grateful Dead. According to folktales, if someone pays the debts of a corpse, the ghost of the Grateful Dead band comes back to help his benefactor. Weir and Kreutzmann didn't like it, but the name stuck. In 1966, the Dead were regular performers at the Avalon Ballroom in the Fillmore, playing almost every weekend. They moved into an old Victorian mansion in the center of Haight-Ashbury, and soon it was filled with girlfriends, engineers, and pals. Neil Cassidy, the inspiration for Jack Kerouac's On the Road, had the attic room. It was chaotic, people stopping by day and night. Fans wandered in the unlocked front doors. It was all one big family. By then, the rest of the country had realized something was going on in San Francisco.
When it got really weird in the Haight-Ashbury, we woke up one morning and there was the Gray Lines tour bus out in front of our house.
Record company scouts came to the Bay Area.
The record companies were regarded in San Francisco at that time as kind of robber barons who would just come in and plunder whatever they could.
Riding their local reputation, the Dead drove a hard bargain and signed with Warner Brothers Records. The deal gave them unlimited studio time. The Dead's first album didn't exactly burn up the pop charts, but FM radio stations played it, and with a record in the stores, the band could tour beyond the Bay Area. In June 1967, the Dead played the Monterey Pop Festival for a set sandwiched between The Who and Jimi Hendrix. After the festival, the Dead acted like hippie Robin Hoods. They made off with $1 million worth of amplifiers and speakers from the Monterey stage and played unannounced free concerts around San Francisco. At the end of the week, they gave all the equipment back. By the end of the Summer of Love, Haight-Ashbury was overloaded and turning mean. Unscrupulous characters were moving in, selling bad drugs and preying on the new arrivals. On October 2nd, 1967, the police raided the Dead's house and busted the residence for marijuana possession. It was front-page news in San Francisco, and it was headlined in the first issue of Rolling Stone. The legal repercussions weren't serious, but reality was setting in.
But if you got a warrant, I guess you're gonna come in. Busted.
Early in 1968, the Grateful Dead took on a second drummer, Mickey Hart from New York. He had played military music in Air Force bands and gave the rhythm section a jolt of adrenaline. For their second record, the Dead wanted to make a unified album, not just a collection of songs. Anthem of the Sun was a non-stop collage that mixed live shows and studio tracks, elaborate songs, and electronic noise. The band worked on their next album, Oxo Moxa, for 8 months, assembling most of the songs track by track instead of performing them together. There was tension in the studio. Both Pigpen and Bob Weir were on the verge of being fired for their technical limitations. Eventually, though, friendship and loyalty won out over musical perfectionism. But none of their albums sold well, leaving the Dead in debt to Warner Brothers to the tune of $180,000.
Any musician who's making records, who's appearing, doing things like that, is basically, they're working for some unknown group of businessmen somewhere. That's an unfortunate thing. Why is something like music a business?
The road was more rewarding. Concerts meant converts, so they toured from coast to coast. In 1969, the band played 152 shows and released Live Dead, the first of many concert albums. They also played the Woodstock Music and Arts Festival.
The stage started to sink on one side. It became a little lopsided. Then the PA went off. Then we were supposed to play.
It wasn't the Dead's night. They consider Woodstock one of their worst shows ever. The Bay Area's own big festival, Altamont, headlined by the Rolling Stones, turned into a worse mess. There were fistfights and bad vibes everywhere.
It was like hell. You know, it was like a nice afternoon in hell.
During the Stones set, a man was knifed to death. The Dead decided not to play. Hippie freedom had brought madness as well as enlightenment. It was time to ease back from the edge. Even before Altamont, the Dead had been cooling out audiences with country songs and making part of their sets acoustic.
Cold mountain water, the cheap merchant started.
As the 1960s ended, Bob Dylan had turned toward country, and groups like The Band, The Byrds, and Crosby, Stills and Nash followed. As the 70s began, the Dead wanted to turn back to unadorned storytelling songs. The result was Working Man's Dead, released in May 1970. American Beauty followed it 6 months later. Garcia's mother and Lesha's father both died during the making of American Beauty. But it's an album filled with consolation and hope. American Beauty became the Dead's first gold album. What a long, strange trip it's been, the band sang in trucking. They had only been together for 5 years. Most of the trip was ahead of them. Pigpen, who had helped turn the Dead into an electric band, was now the odd man out. He was the drinker in a band of drug users. He was the die-hard bluesman amid the hippies. He was a crowd pleaser during the Dead's concerts. But by 1971, his drinking caught up with him. And that summer, he was hospitalized with severe liver damage. He stopped drinking and went back on tour with the band. He sang on the album Europe 72. In 1973, he died of a gastrointestinal hemorrhage and cirrhosis of the liver. He was 27 years old. Dead stopped playing the songs Pigpen had sung, but they never gave up blues and soul. They worked in a new keyboard player, Keith Godchow, along with his wife Donna on backing vocals. Keith had some classical training and a lot of experience in jazz groups. He gave the music a hint of gospel and ragtime. The audiences in the 1970s kept on growing, and the band kept working, more than 100 shows a year. Early on, the Dead recognized that its fans were faithful.
It became apparent to us in the 70s that we had a little traveling gypsy city.
Bottom line of the whole scene is very simply stated. There is nothing like a Grateful Dead concert.
In 1971, the Dead put out Grateful Dead. A small notice inside read, "Dead Freaks Unite. Who are you? Where are you? How are you?" Only 350 replies came in at first, but it was the beginning of a mailing list that grew and grew to more than 100,000 names. Official Deadheads received a newsletter and the first word about concerts. Eventually, the Dead would be able to sell out shows by just word of mouth. The Dead weren't playing clubs or ballrooms anymore. They were touring stadiums. That meant they had to put together a professional business operation. It also meant they had to fill bigger places with sound. In 1974, the Dead started touring with what they called the Wall of Sound. It was 3 stories high and weighed 23 tons, with 641 speakers pumping out 26,400 watts. The sound was magnificent, but the overhead was $100,000 a month. The Dead finished their contract with Warner Brothers in 1973.
We decided, hey, we got to be able to do better than this. We got to be able to be more humane than these people are. We got to be able to be more fair than these people are. Let's just do it ourselves. We might not make as much money, but I guess my bet is we will. We just won't get taken for as much.
Grateful Dead Records made its debut in the record stores in November 1973 with Wake of the Flood, a new studio album. 7 months later, the Dead's label released From the Mars Hotel. But the band was overloaded. Running a record company, touring with a monster sound system, and recording albums were all full-time jobs. Even the cocaine they started using couldn't keep the energy going. It was time for a break, and in October 1974, the Dead announced they were retiring from the road. They finished up with a 5-night stand at Winterland in San Francisco. After the shows, the Wall of Sound was dismantled. The Dead gave most of it away, providing sound systems for a dozen smaller bands.
I guess it doesn't matter anyway.
The Dead said they hadn't broken up, but to their fans it looked like the end of the road. Garcia formed a bluegrass group. Weir worked with another band, Kingfish. By the time they made the next Dead album, Blues for Allah, Grateful Dead Records was in financial trouble. The soundtrack for the Grateful Dead movie Steal Your Face was the label's last album.
At one point in the mid-70s, we were all carrying briefcases, and we had our own record company. That was pushing it too far because it took up too much of our time.
The Dead decided to be a little more businesslike, and in mid-1976 went back on the road, but with a manageable sound system and a manageable schedule.
Right outside this lazy summer.
They signed up with Clive Davis at Arista Records, who had some ideas about selling a few albums. For the first time in a decade, the Dead worked with a producer from outside the band. Keith Olsen, who had made huge hits with Fleetwood Mac, produced Terrapin Station. He trimmed away wrong notes and loose ends and stabilized the beat.
It was kind of fun working with different guys for a while and, getting a different slant on the recording process and the whole methodology of it.
The Grateful Dead were getting professional, and if the results didn't seem to mean much at the time, they would in years to come. From the late 1970s onward, the Dead developed a comfortable routine for their 6 months on the road, playing about 70 shows a year.
You know it's the end.
concerts had grown to marathons, 3 or 4 hours long. A typical show started with a long tune-up and a set of distinct songs. Then, after a long intermission that might include some of Phil Lesh's electronic music, the band came back for a free-form jam, followed by Hart and Kreutzmann attacking a vast assortment of percussion. In 1978, the Dead decided to play some real blues for Allah and went to Egypt to perform at the Pyramids.
So we treated ourselves to a giant 3-week party in Cairo and playing in front of the pyramids for 3 days, which was a dream that we've had, years ago. Let's take the Grateful Dead to Egypt.
It was a high-tech pilgrimage that cost the band $500,000. They traveled with more than 100 people and brought 25 tons of sound, light, and film equipment. The band set up between the paws of the Sphinx and played for 3 nights. The Grateful Dead's fans continued to be loyal. Deadheads would take leaves of absence from jobs or school, pile into a van, and follow the band around the country.
It's part of one of the last remaining adventures. You can't ride the rails anymore in America. It's tough to hitchhike even, but you can have an experience out on the road with the Grateful Dead. You can follow the band around for a tour. You can have those kind of adventures.
While the pop market tried out disco and new wave, the Dead had become something to depend on, a rock institution. They had created their own world. But they still weren't selling anywhere near as many records as they were concert seats. For the next record, Shakedown Street, they turned to a different producer, Lowell George, the leader of Little Feat. Some disgruntled old fans complained the Dead had gone commercial, dismissing the album as disco dead.
We came up with a couple of disco tunes, or quasi-disco tunes. I won't name them, you'll have to go find them.
George convinced the band to do a Rascals song Pigpen used to sing, Good Lovin'.
Well, I was feeling, sort of bad, y'all. Asked my family doctor about what I had, y'all.
Good Lovin' got some radio play, but it wasn't the hit they hoped for. There were other problems in the band. Keith Godchow had been struggling for years with depression and hard drugs, downers and then heroin.
Being in a stupor and trying to play music is irreverent, and it's irresponsible and it's bad form.
By the late 1970s, Keith's playing was going downhill. Sometimes he even nodded out on stage.
Keith and Donna were sort of going into a different direction. They were locked pretty much into their own family drama.
It was like a soap opera, really. It was difficult for both of them, Donna and Keith.
It was taking energy away from the band itself. So it was logical that they move on.
Late in 1978, Keith and Donna Godchow agreed to quit the band. They played their last show in 1979. Just over a year later, Keith Godchow was killed in a traffic accident. A new keyboardist moved into the Dead's hot seat, Brent Midland, who had been working with Weir in one of his side projects, Bobby and the Midnights.
He never got over feeling he was the new guy. So when he fit right in, he's an excellent player, an excellent singer, excellent writer.
Midland brought a whole array of keyboards, not just piano and organ, but synthesizers, giving the music a new sparkle. The Dead made one more album with an outside producer, Go to Heaven. Again, they aimed for music that might get played on the radio, and the single, Alabama Getaway, reached the lower half of Billboard's Hot 100.
Alabama, get away, get away. Alabama, get away, get away. Only way to please me is just to travel through the marketplace.
Although Go to Heaven reached number 23, It was the last album the Dead would make in the studio for 7 years.
We were never a recording band. I never looked at the Grateful Dead in those terms. Grateful Dead was in the moment, live, in front of an audience, and without a net.
In 1980, the band again returned to its roots by opening a series of shows at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco and Radio City Music Hall in New York with acoustic sets. The shows were the source of 1981's live albums, Reckoning and Dead Set. Through the early 1980s, the Dead were a phenomenon. They didn't have an album in the charts, but year in and year out, old fans came to see them, and new fans discovered them.
Well, her parents like it when we come home and say we're going to go see the Dead, because they've gone and done it themselves. So.
The Dead looked after deadheads. They began selling 20 to 40% of concert tickets by mail order, bypassing scalpers and long lines. As the money rolled in, the Dead started the Rex Foundation to give money to worthy causes. Most of the 1980s deadheads were not graying baby boomers, but the boomers' children, wearing tie-dyed T-shirts and looking for the spirit of the 1960s in the era of Ronald Reagan and MTV. In the Dead, they heard freedom and risk and teamwork, as well as good time music with deep roots. To the general public, it might have seemed that the Dead had disappeared, but the fans and concert promoters knew differently. Wherever the Dead played, they could expect the place to sell out. Year after year, they were one of the highest grossing acts on the concert circuit. Dead concerts became a tribal phenomenon. Deadheads arrived early at stadium parking lots where vendors sold homemade T-shirts, home-cooked food, clandestine drugs, and a huge selection of old Dead concert tapes.
Actually, we sell something that's really different. It's called a Daydreamer, and it's a purple mask that you put over your face, and you blow into a tube at the base, which makes a wheel spin inside, and you look toward the sun and keep your eyes shut, and it sends quick pulses of light through your eyelid, and it stimulates the retina and makes you see spiraling colors and patterns.
Inside the shows, one corner looked like a forest of microphones on poles. It was the tapers section, where the Dead allowed fans to record shows without hassles. Unlike most bands, the Dead weren't worried about bootlegs.
That's what we provide for people is music, and however they want to appreciate it, if they want to have it and hold it on tape, they're certainly free to do that. You know, some of those tapes represent big moments for some people, I guess.
But not all was well. Local police and the Drug Enforcement Administration figured out that there would be drug use at Grateful Dead concerts. They moved in on the parking lot parties, using plainclothes detectives in tie-dyed clothes to bust deadheads. And quietly, mostly off stage, drugs were taking their toll on the band. Garcia had moved from LSD to cocaine to a potent form of heroin called Persian White. He had been the band's most prolific songwriter and motivator, and as his attention wandered, the band went on autopilot. A few new songs were played on stage as the band continued to tour, but the Dead didn't get around to recording them. As thousands of Deadheads watched, Garcia got heavier and more sluggish.
Wheel is turning and you can't slow down. You can't let go and you can't hold on. You can't go back and you can't stand still. The thunder don't hit you in the lightning.
Eventually, the band confronted Garcia to tell him he was destroying himself. They demanded that he make a choice, his drug habits or the band. Garcia said in that case he'd take the drugs. The others backed down.
We knew Jerry's health wasn't good. We had tried to get him into rehab. We tried to do everything. We did everything we possibly could, from just individuals talking to him to full scale, the whole band going up, marching up and knocking on his door. He had to do it his way.
In In January 1985, Garcia was arrested in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, where the Dead had played so many times. He was sitting in his BMW, and a cop came over because he saw a lapsed registration. When he searched the car, he found packets of heroin and cocaine. Garcia promised to enter a drug treatment program.
And in fact, he never did go to rehab that time. The reason he got sick was because he tried to quit. So, and he tried to quit without any medical supervision or help or anything like that.
Jerry's addiction had taken a toll. During the Dead's 1986 tour, Garcia collapsed in a diabetic coma and was near death for 5 days. When he awoke, his first words were, "I'm not Beethoven." After the coma, Garcia had to relearn the guitar. He spent 3 months working through scales and chords, getting his reflexes back. When Garcia was fully revived, he felt he had been given a second chance, and the band perked up with him.
They always love it when I don't die. I always get a lot of mileage out of that.
After their long hiatus, the Dead decided to make another album. In the Dark, the Dead's first studio album in 7 years, was released in July of 1987. The songs weren't brand new, and thanks to concert tapes, some of the Deadheads could sing along on every word. But somehow, this time the Dead reached the pop market.
The album went to number 6, I think, and the single went to number 9, and it was, it was exciting. It was like, wow, look, we got a top 10 record. Can you believe it? A top 10 record.
It was the Dead's first top 10 album after more than 20 years of recording. There was even a music video. The Dead were triumphant. They had reached mainstream America on their own terms and their own extended timetable. They had their first platinum album within the Dark. With full-fledged pop success, the Grateful Dead had a huge new audience, for better and for worse. All of a sudden, everybody was a Dead fan. From politicians to famous athletes. From Salvador Dali to the high school kid next door. Bands inspired by the Dead appeared all over America, jamming at clubs for tie-dyed dancers who wanted room to twirl. To people who were just finding out about the band, Dead concerts looked like a chance to get happy and get crazy. It was a little vacation to the late 1960s. The parking lot parties got bigger, with more hustlers on the fringes. Just as Haight-Ashbury had been overrun once it was discovered, the Dead's traveling show began to feel less like a family reunion and more like a mob. Yet the music was getting stronger. Garcia was playing with renewed purpose, and the band felt vindicated. On tour, full houses seemed even fuller, but the Deadhead party threatened to spin out of control. In 1989, the year the Dead released their last studio album, Built to Last, violence started to crop up. Arrests for drugs, disturbing the peace, and vandalism marred concerts across the country. There had always been a few Deadheads who would show up at sold-out concerts hoping for an extra ticket, but now there were gate crashers. In 1989, a fan named Adam Katz died outside a New Jersey show under mysterious circumstances with a fractured skull. In Los Angeles, a fan who was on LSD died while in police custody.
We popularized ourselves almost out of existence. So we had to almost stop. They almost stopped our touring because we couldn't leave in our wake dead people. That wasn't what the Grateful Dead was all about.
The Dead recorded public service announcements asking Deadheads to be more responsible. but the problems didn't go away. In 1990, they had another casualty. Brent Midland died from an overdose of cocaine and morphine. He was the third Grateful Dead keyboard player to die. Vince Welnick of the Tubes replaced him. Despite the turmoil, the band kept rolling. In the first half of 1991, the Dead grossed $20 million on the road. The stadiums were full. The band invited jazz musicians like David Murray and Branford Marsalis to sit in, keeping the surprises coming. Garcia also went public as a painter. Soon afterward, he introduced a line of neckties splashed with his abstract designs. They sold in the millions. But Garcia was weakening again. In 1991, he told Rolling Stone that he felt like the band was running on inertia, losing its spirit.
When he said that, he was speaking for himself. That was when he was running out of inertia. As he was declining, we had to pick up the slack. The band got more momentum together, almost in spite of Jerry.
In 1992, he collapsed from exhaustion.
I'd been sort of declining for a long time without really thinking about it, but I was just very tired. I had very little energy. It was difficult for me to move around even.
The band canceled a tour, and once again, Garcia vowed to shape up. He lost 60 pounds, and in 1994, he got married to Deborah Coons, a longtime girlfriend. That same year, the band made $50 million. But the success of the band and Jerry's marriage couldn't hide the fact that the troubles were getting worse. At a show in Indianapolis, FBI agents informed Garcia before he went on stage that there was a death threat against him. Jerry was using heroin again, and it was taking a toll on his body and his music. It almost seemed as if whatever magic had protected the Grateful Dead faded as Garcia got weaker.
Much after 1991 or 92, I don't think we ever really caught the flame again, like we had for all those 25 years before that. I look back on the last 4 or 5 years of the band, and I don't remember many of those moments. And it's sad, but that's what was happening.
After the summer tour of 1995, Garcia quietly checked into the Betty Ford Clinic, trying to break his heroin addiction. 2 weeks into a month-long program, he checked himself out. The next month, he entered another drug treatment center, Serenity Knolls, north of San Francisco. He never left.
Well, I guess some sad news has come our way. This morning, Jerry Garcia, our friend, my brother, passed away. And I guess not much can be said about that, except that perhaps it's a big loss for the world, for anyone who loves music.
To lay me down once more, to lay me down.
Jerry Garcia's death brought an outpouring of grief across America. People cried in the streets of San Francisco and held memorials all over the world. Businessmen left work early. The Republican governor of Massachusetts wore a black armband. The mayor of San Francisco raised a tie-dyed flag over City Hall. Even the president of the United States felt the loss.
Well, he was just a great talent. I mean, he was a genius. He had a great gift. And so I was very sad when he died. He had at least 2 generations of Deadheads, you know. I was really pleased to see the Grateful Dead have one more great run around the country, in the last couple of years, and see all these young teenagers, gravitating to a group that all of us liked 20 or more years ago.
25,000 Deadheads attended a memorial service in Golden Gate Park on the very field the Dead had played 28 years earlier in the height of the Summer of Love.
Now that the singer is gone, where shall I go for the song?
Jerry, God bless you. Go with God. I love you. We shared thousands of great grooves, magic moments. All of us.
Take your heart, take your face, and reflect back some of the joy that he gave you.
For months, the other band members agonized over a decision. Could the band continue without Garcia? The Dead supported a huge organization, from road crew to T-shirt vendors with pensions and health insurance like any other corporation. But in the end, they agreed there could be no Grateful Dead without Jerry.
After Jerry died, that was it. We did it with everything we had. We had a great time for many years. And there was a lot of suffering, there was a lot of pain, there was a lot of joy. We brought a lot of good feeling. We spread our dust around the world, and it's a lot to have done in your lifetime.
In December 1995, the band announced that after 30 years, their long, strange trip was over. For Deadheads, it was the end of an era, but the music didn't stop. The Dead left behind a vault full of unreleased recordings, enough to keep new albums coming for years. In 1996, several live recordings were released as part of the Dick's Picks and From the Vault series. The Arista years collected the band's most popular music from 1977 until the end. In June of 1996, the surviving members of the band performed together at a concert as part of the San Francisco Symphony's An American Festival series. Michael Tilson Thomas, the symphony's conductor, jammed with the band. Then came another summer, and with it another kind of tour. The Dead survivors and friends organized the Further Festival, named after the sign on the Merry Pranksters bus. Bob Weir and Mickey Hart brought their own bands, sharing a bill with Dead friends like Los Lobos and Hot Tuna. Of course, there was a jam session again. And in the audience and in the parking lot were the Deadheads, dancing to songs they had shared for years. It was a wake and it was a celebration for the Grateful Dead, a band that in 30 years of playing never stopped making it up as they went along.
Silver wine and I'm calling Vegas too. I got me a violin and I beg you call it too. Anybody's choice.
Catch Stevie Nicks, Shania, Madonna, and more on VH1 Superwomen Sunday. Sunday morning starting at 9:30, 8:30 Central, only on VH1.
The song go. Come hear Uncle John's band by the riverside.